Okay, Trevor. So thanks for coming on the podcast. I know you and I have been trying to connect several times, and both you and me, we had to reschedule. So we're finally on the mic. I appreciate it. But you and I met
Definitely.
through really because of this pandemic. I think we were introduced through some networking things, right? Or was it before? I don't remember if we were
I feel like
connected
I've
just
known you for a
before,
long time,
but
Mitch.
we never met
You
in
know,
person though. So I know even if we were introduced before, we
yeah,
never met before we got quarantined,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Okay, but now because of Zoom, we could see each other, so that's good.
of course.
Exactly. All right. So you know all about the podcast, and when you and I have been talking for a long time. So today we're going to talk about, the financial side of running your business and doing a business plan and being on top of all that kind of stuff. We'll try and keep it, as down to earth as we can, because sometimes you and I get real technical on things, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
But maybe you want to go back a little bit, talk about, like where you're from, where you grew up, what your background is, your training, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
Good.
listen, so I got a pretty unique background. So I grew up in Toms River. I'm a local guy in New Jersey. I spent some time down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I went to school, got my degree and everything. And, I've done everything from work in the distressed debt management on the sales side to venture capitalism to nonprofit. So, it's a very interesting career. Like I started my career as a landscape architect, what I went to school for. And
Makes
midway
sense.
through, my parents were like, "Well, if you want to do business, you got to change the business." So,
Right.
all right, let's go to business. And I got my degree in business management down at Coastal Carolina University,
Okay.
and really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I was an intern for a hedge fund, buying and selling debt. It was really kind of cool. Made a ton of money. This is what I want to do, but I had to come back home.
So buying and selling debt, you mean you were buying like corporate bonds and things for
Yeah,
trading for
yeah, like Chapter
institutions?
11. So
Got
like
it.
30 cents
Distressed
on the
debt.
dollar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
distressed debt. It's a real interesting market. And,
Right.
my background wasn't in that, but I'm a good commission person. I like doing it. I was
Right.
enjoying it. And, I had some, unfortunate things happen in my life where I had to come home. My father passed away right before I graduated college.
Oh,
And I needed to come home
that was
and
when you were in Myrtle Beach, in that area?
yeah.
Okay.
So it changed me. Obviously, things change who you are. But
Of course.
I learned from early on. My father was 30-year veteran in the car automotive industry as a service manager.
Okay.
So I saw the value of relationships before, like as I was learning to walk and talk.
Right.
I could see, what honesty, integrity, transparency really
Right.
did, and how it kind of brought you where you need to be. So
Of course, because it builds a network of trust and with people that you know, right?
yeah, and I really enjoyed it. Like so it really got my first start. So my first job was at a small investment firm, and I don't even call them a PE. They're just a small investment firm that owned retail flower shops in the local area, Ocean County, Monmouth County, and then Middlesex County.
So they were investors meaning they were inactive business.
It
They were silent partners in the business,
Well,
basically.
it was an ownership of like a family fund of one person who basically took the business from his father and had
Right.
a backstop of like a fund behind him. And so what his model was, he was a unique artist designer, but saw the value of the retail flower shops. And
Right.
I took my first job there, as I'll call it a sales analyst, but I did sales. I looked at their POS system. I learned the power of supply chain, cost of goods sold, inventory pricing, inventory turns. I got to get a good business understanding of how a small business works way
Right.
early on in my career. And then from there, I went into New York in the advertising world and spent time in the client finance positions. And then ultimately, I transcended to manufacturing for a company called Dover Corporation, where I served as a consultant as they moved from New York to Chicago. And I kind of
Okay.
helped transition the two offices and then help kind of create a lot of the reporting structures they have today. And then I hopped into my bigger role in private equity, where I spent a majority of my career at a company called Ports America. They owned and operated most of the terminals in the United States. I think it was 43 or 45 when I left there
Okay.
back in 2019. I say it like it's forever ago,
Right.
a year ago. And then from there, what I decided to do was I got a great understanding. I went up the traditional accounting finance role, finance manager,
Right.
analyst manager, controller, director. And then ultimately, I pivoted into my own business model, which is where I am today.
Okay.
So at the beginning of last year, I had an opportunity to take a buyout from the company I was at, Ports America,
Okay.
and really kind of focus on what I learned there in finance and operations. So across my whole career, I basically tied myself to operations. Even if I didn't have a direct reporting link to it, in my mind, I reported to operations.
Okay.
I always reported to my boss and took care of, the people I needed to take care of. But
Right.
I could create something great, but then if I can't get it to be bought in by operations and then also manage it from their aspect, it means nothing. If
Right.
those two aren't in sync, it means absolutely nothing.
Right, because
So
operations and management, that's all the people, right? And
yeah,
businesses don't exist without people. So if you don't,
like
I mean, a lot of
like
people miss that. It's businesses
like
don't in and of themselves operate without people. Somebody
like
started it, somebody runs it, somebody puts the money. If all the people go away, there won't be a company. So, you
like if I
know,
told you if you moved one move an hour faster, it would make me, I don't know, 10% more EBITDA.
right,
How would you go ahead and control that, Mitch? Like
right,
as like you'd have to go to John, Sue, Sally, Will, all the people that are working that are moving this product or service and
right,
influence them to come up or come down depending on where you need the number to be.
right,
So too often in finance we get caught up in KPIs, those big words, key performance indicators,
right,
plans, budgets, forecasts, whatever the thing is, and we lose sight of what that actually drives.
right.
Essentially the operations is making the change. They're driving revenue and they're driving efficiency. So
Right, but you were
you
more
have the part.
hands-on, like, right? So some of the finance guys are just bean counters. They're producing the numbers, they're giving you all the indicators, and they're saying, "Here you go. This is what needs to improve." If you're not hands-on, it goes out to the management operations, may never get implemented, right?
Yeah. So like I relate it to like looking at like a financial model, right? With a balance sheet, a cash flow, you're looking at your receivables, DSO, all these fancy,
Terms,
financial
yeah.
terms, which are great. But if the core of the model is relating around operations, which it always is, and you don't have the right people in place and they're not speaking the right language, or
Right,
vis-a-vis finance doesn't understand the language they're speaking, it's broken. I've
right,
seen it happen. I can't even count how many times I've seen a model break because the people inputting the data don't understand what it means. Like, yeah, I can create checks and balances so I foot, so I don't have any like I'll call it circular errors or circular like references, but if I don't understand the kind of, you know, movement of the service or the good or how much it costs me if I do this, then it means nothing. Model's just numbers on a piece of paper or an Excel document for that matter.
right, right. Well, for the average business owner, they're probably not doing too much modeling. They don't have
Exactly.
access to your kind of services. They're just trying to figure out what do they price a product at and how do they run their business efficiently. Um,
Yeah. So that kind of, so it sweeps me back into what I'm doing now. So,
Good.
so basically I designed my consulting business to kind of help us and focus on business owners that are smaller in nature that just really need some guidance, right?
Right.
Hey, listen, I think what we see with a lot of business owners, they'll get caught up in day-to-day things. Hey, I own a flooring shop and I got to send my crews out there every day. But
Right.
the people that are collecting the information for me, if they don't put it in right, it takes longer for the guys to get out to the site.
Right.
If it takes longer, it costs more money. I mean, that's
Right.
just plain
Well,
and
that's
simple.
an
That's
inefficiency. It's a
basic
good
math.
example, right? Yeah, exactly.
But you have to hit it from the choke point. You have to go back to how is that person collecting the data? And what'll
Right.
happen is when the business owner gets consumed in trying to figure that out, they're not growing the business.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of not paying homage to like, hey, listen, I need to have the best service, the best
Right.
quality. What am I doing for my customers? How am I
Right.
marketing? Like
Well, because
all
they're
the
not
things that
working on
business
the
owners.
business anymore. They're stuck working in the business. We do that, right? You come to work, you have a whole list of things you want to work on that day. You get to none of them because you're putting out fires and you're dealing with problems. That's why having
Exactly.
a plan, and we've talked about this before, that's why having a written plan, the finance portion, the marketing portion, is something you go back to because the day got away from you. You got to do the
Yeah.
planning. Yeah, I agree. And if you never get to the point where you can be at the 30,000 foot level, it's very hard to move forward as a business owner because you're just putting out fires all day. You don't know what's going on. You can't
Well,
measure those kind of things.
that and also like we talk about the word like the budget. Like I
Yeah.
use the word budget as like the holy grail. Regardless if
Absolutely.
you forecast or trend or plan your business, like you had a set of construct that you put together when you initially set out to do this endeavor.
Right.
I was
This
going to
is what it's
make,
going to cost me. This is what I need for startup capital. This is what I need to
yeah,
produce the product. This is all kinds of things. Right. Of course.
yeah. So
Hopefully.
like, and then ultimately the goal is from my capacity is to say, hey, how have you been tracking against that? I mean, in
Right.
most cases, business owners get so caught up in the day to day and the fires and everything else, they never sit back and say, hey, listen, I've been paying, the vendor who supplies my calculators, whatever this name is, I don't know, $1,000 a month. Well, hey, I'm Trevor and I can sell you calculators for, $500 a month.
Right.
Like where's the opportunity costing there of not being able to evaluate those kind of, I'll call them low hanging fruit. A lot of people like that word, things that are just low hanging fruit, right? For the viewers, just
They're
easy
gimmies,
things to pick
easy
out.
stuff. Right.
You step
Exactly.
over it. It's almost like, hey, I can walk.
Yeah. I really
thankfully
should be
we can all
doing
walk.
that, but I don't have time. You're like, but you're giving up 20% margin.
Yeah, and it's all about margin at the end of the game, right? So you set yourself up in a way that you have to understand your cost before you can understand your price.
Right.
And I think that's what business owners had a great idea. Hey, I have an idea of like back of the envelope math, and this is what I should charge.
It's a product, it's a service, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then over time, what'll happen is this rate and the top half gets played with all the time, right?
Yeah.
Discounts, bundles, all those kind of cool, sexy terms. But your cost keeps growing. And as you know, and every other person in the world knows, costs go up every year. I don't care if you're a personal person or a vendor, there's a rate. There's cost increase in the state of New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, whatever.
Well, I think a lot of small business owners don't recognize that cost of goods sold, right? The cost of producing their product or service is one part of it, right? And then there's all their operational costs and taxes and all these things that are happening behind licensing or whatever going on.
Legal fees, rent, facilities.
That drive up prices that people don't pay attention to until they're like scratching their head and they're like, I don't understand, why are we not making any money? And I'm sure during this pandemic, a lot of people are scratching their head because you and I both know most business owners, you can't tell them we're going to take a 60-day vacation and shut the business, come back in 60 days. They won't be able to come back. So
exactly,
I always say that cash flow hides a lot of problems. Like if you have cash flow, you have capital in the bank, it just hides things and you get lazy about it. And, you really don't do the right things. And then something like this happens, all the smoke clears because nobody's working. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm not even in business.
Yeah. Why am I paying $100 a month for Vonage or whatever?
Right.
Like I don't have anything there. Like what am I doing
but
with
you didn't care about it before because cash flow kept coming in and
right.
the door and you don't realize.
It hides sins, right? I used to use the old word volume hides a lot of sins, right? I'm doing
good term.
Millions of dollars up top. Even if I don't make a ton of money, I'm still churning the top. I'm churning.
Right. Exactly.
But until it becomes to a situation like where we're in now, where there's no churn and like everyone's depleted, it's like, holy crap. I got a roof on this house and there's like one stud in the wall.
Yeah.
Shit's going to collapse. I mean, pardon my French.
And there'll be small business owners that don't come back because of this, because they just can't. They can't do it.
It's a real shame because what's going to happen is the business owners that don't kind of partner with different people. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't like I'd love everyone to use me and I love everyone to use you, Mitch. But I think you and I do a justice to the small business model. But it's just kind of looking at things in a different limelight and spending some time focusing on how to run your business efficiently and profitably.
Right.
People talk about discounts. I hear the word price discounts all over the place. Like, hey, can I give 25%, get people in the door? Can I give 50%? Obviously now, since sales are meek, meek, like I want to give 60%. Well, what does that do to
They figure like $1 is better than zero, right? That's not always the case.
It's not. I mean, it's just, I always go to I go back to basics, right? I'm selling this phone. It cost me $500 to make it. How much am I selling it for? Just plain and simple. Now that's $500 to make the phone. But now I got to pay myself. I got to pay Mitch. I got to pay this laptop I'm on, this calculator I use, this coffee mug,
some rent,
this
internet,
charger,
different kind of stuff.
The landline. Those are those indirect costs, right? We talk direct and indirect. Let's just play plain and simple. Direct, cost of goods sold, anything related to the product or service. Indirect, myself, you, salaries,
the actual
legal work,
operational cost of the business.
Yeah. And when you do pricing, to do it correctly, you have to have some kind of either allocation, percentage, or at least an exact number you put in to mark those costs. Because what will happen is those costs, as we just spoke about, always grow.
They creep
and if you only look at it at the direct level, your margin's going to degrade over time.
Right. Your
because exactly like things will, it's just my revenue only goes up X, but the other costs go up Y.
Right. And then it narrows the gap.
Yeah. And it's something very simple to do. I mean, it's just, hey, listen, I used to charge, let's say I charge $50 a square foot for teak hardwood floors.
Okay.
Well, now I go back and look at it and, hey, I should have been putting another, $10 on top of it for my overhead costs. So maybe I can't get 60 in the marketplace, but I'll tell you what, maybe I can get 57, 58. You play
Right.
with the price point a little bit, and then at least you've started to close the gap.
Right.
Like you've made an attempt to close the gap. Right now, it's like, hey, I can't do anything. I can't charge any more than what I'm already charging. Like I
Right.
just can't survive. The customers are going to hate me. People pay for quality. I've
Right.
worked in large billion-dollar corporations where I've heard executives, EVPs, SVPs, you name it. I don't care about price. If quality's there, then I trust you. The integrity's there, transparency is there. Now, in the consumer world, that's not always the same
Of
thing, but there are
course.
people that do pay less above the price if they're getting a quality service,
Yeah, and there's
right?
price your well, not impression, but your how you view price and value versus what is value and real. So some people may not see the value of your product at a higher price. And look, there are industries you and I both know where you just can't price it high enough. So you better pay attention to your costs.
Exactly, your
So
underlying
can you
cost.
get your operational costs down low enough to be able to compete for price? And you don't have to be the lowest in the marketplace. That's a really bad route to go down in most cases, right? Because you can
Yeah,
only compete on price so much. So, but you don't want to be the most expensive. I mean, you can be in some cases, right? But there's still going to be a top to the marketplace. So if you're not watching your operational costs, and I think a lot of business owners who are smaller, they think of guys like you and me as like, oh no, I'm not a big enough company to have an outside CFO and a general counsel. Those are for larger manufacturing corporations and big, organizations and stuff. But that's not true. So
yeah,
there may be there's a lot of business owners that they can't put enough more pressure on their price, right? Because they're at a value level and maybe they can improve their value and push up the price a little bit, but they better pay real close attention to their operational costs and their the non-product related costs, not cost of goods sold, right? The ones that you mentioned,
yeah.
because that may be what makes or breaks them. I mean, in the short run,
I
right?
mean, listen, you can like I use the word like Six Sigma, lean, all these like bottlenecks, all these inefficiency words. But when it comes down to it, it's just looking at kind of line item detail and saying, hey, like what's an average? Like I
Right.
just give you an example. Let's say I wanted to procure legal services for a will. Well,
Right.
maybe I go on the internet, search it, and
Oh
then
my
I
God,
look.
you can
Hey, I'm
find.
paying I'm paying $5,000 a month and it's like 2,500 over here for Mitch or whatever the case is. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it's just about taking that time and peeling back the onion, like
Oh yeah, there's no question
and
about it.
and process flow, right? Where we talk about like a flow chart, all these sexy words, but again, let's bring it down to basics. What do you do? Like
Right.
when I call you, give me the triggers, step 1 through 8,000. I don't care.
Right.
Hey, I answer the phone. All right. Well, how are you answering the phone? What do you
Yeah.
do when you answer the phone? What's the script you go through? All right. What we get from there? Where does the people go from there? Do we then outbound people, or is then now it's a product? So now you're queuing up the order to your, supplier or whomever. Like just follow the chain, and then eventually, when you look at this big chain, you could say, "Hey, listen, step 3 inside the chain's broken."
And this is
Like
where
right
we're
there, I'm
losing
not getting
money. We're spending too much time. It's the wrong people that are
I'm
doing
not
it,
getting
whatever it
critical
is.
information that's impacting my operations. That's making me inefficient from a cost mechanism. All right.
Okay.
Well, it didn't take a rocket scientist. Like, by no means am I smarter than everyone else. I mean, there's a
Right.
ton of consulting firms out there, right? It's just about partnering and understanding what the business owner wants, right?
Right.
Like, what do you see as like anything that takes you away from what you're doing? In my mind, is what I'd like to help you on. I wish there was a term for that because I wouldn't call it a fractional CFO or a COO. It's hey, how do I be a partner to your business?
Right.
Like I actually rebranded my business recently to add the COO because
Yeah, because you're
operations
an
and
operations
finance,
expert. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
finance is part of
operations
that. Yeah, there's no question
they
about it.
tie hand in hand,
Of
and
course, they should.
you know,
If they
like
don't talk, you got problems.
hey, listen, if a sales guy is quoting a business, and he's saying, hey, I can do these floors or I can paint your house for 25% less, you know, me being a finance guy says, oh, immediately, like my margin's lost, right?
Right. Right.
Now, where's the connection between those two people?
Yeah, because
I
he might
mean, it
just be
could be a
making it up
system.
to get the job, and maybe you're losing money because of it. And like, why are we even doing this?
Yeah, but does
There's a
he not
disconnect.
know?
There's
I
no.
go back
Yeah,
to, does
there's a
he not know,
disconnect. There's
Mitch?
certain. Yeah, he
Like
doesn't know.
training.
Right.
Like, hey, listen, if I could come in and say, hey, I'm going to talk to Mitch and Trevor and I'm going to bridge the gap between the two of them, that's invaluable to me. I mean, I'd pay top dollar for that because those are two different worlds that are speaking to each other now.
Right. Of course.
And most of the ideas and projects that I've seen over my career I obviously have a few ones that I tote, obviously, but a lot of them come from the team there. Hey, listen, like I had a customer service person who had this great idea, but
Right.
it never materialized because it didn't have the right buy-in. I hate using the word executive buy-in, but I'll
No.
call it management buy-in for our
Right.
purposes in the
Meaning
small
they
business
thought it
world.
was a good idea. Yeah, exactly.
And they never either played it out or they
Right.
never got buy-in from the actual business owner. And
Right.
that's where everything fails because I feel like they're not partnering with inside their own business. Like
Yeah.
your employees are equity people. I mean, they're not equity people, but if you
If you
treat them
treat
as
them that
such,
way, they have to have the right job and everything. Absolutely. Look, I think a lot of times, look, the sales guy going out should know what price pressure he has. So if he wants to discount and he has certain room to discount and say, listen, I can knock off X, he's got to know what that's doing to the business model. Like, just because your profit margin is 25% doesn't mean you can knock 20% off and you're still making 5. Doesn't work that way. If you keep putting pressure on price pressure on your margins, you're going to run into problems because that gap, like you said, it's not consistent. It's always
yeah.
flexing around. So
Well, that's what I also hate the other side of the coin too. Like you mark up your service so much just to bring it down. To
right.
me, that's like rob Peter to pay Paul kind
Yeah,
of thing.
you're
I feel like
playing
that's
games
just
with your marketing, right?
I feel like maybe I have a different value of integrity, but I feel like to me, if I'm buying a product or a service from you and you dropped it 10% or you dropped it like 30% right off the get-go, I'd say what's going on here? I
So
mean,
why
maybe
wasn't it
because
30% less when I walked in the
maybe
door?
we're a little bit more well informed, Mitch, but at the same time, if
Yeah.
I provide a quality service, my rate's kind of within the marketplace. And I'm like, you know what? I know I could probably give this guy up to 10%. That's my max. And
Right.
I work my way there if I need to, like that makes sense to me.
Right.
Like, to do it
Or
the other
or
way.
he was referred by a center
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
influence
Friends and
from you.
family or whatever the case is,
Somebody
like
you
a
know, and
long-term
you say, listen,
customer.
yeah, financial advisors generally send to me and I discount it usually about 15%
Yeah.
because I can't pay them. So,
Yeah,
I do it
exactly.
as a
Yeah.
courtesy because they're sending me business.
Yeah. And I
So,
mean, but that makes sense. And I'm
but
sure
I
the
can't
business
do 25 or 50. I mean, I can't operate.
but I'm sure that makes sense for as a basis for when they refer to you when you do a quality service at less rate, that just it transcends you and your
Yeah.
business, right? It puts that word out there that you talk about marketing and stuff like maybe you don't need to be spending 20 grand a month on television well, number one, paper ads are dead, and we'll
Right. Of
start there
course.
just in general, but
Yeah.
like maybe that's a way you can cut down on things. People
Of
forget
course.
that if I change things at my cost structure a little bit, or if I do something different, it may affect my cost or it may affect my revenue, right? Either or
Right.
could be good, depending on how
Right.
you do it.
Of course. Could be both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
Absolutely.
about like when I think about challenging vendors, right? That's a big thing I'm about. Like when I talk about the word working capital, right? And the days, like how quickly do you pay people? Like
Yeah.
it's just plain and simple, not just cash out the door. Hey, this vendor, Mitch is my guy, and I pay him net 5 days. Well, why do you
Right.
pay Mitch net 5? I have a great relationship. I get like a 1% quick pay or early pay discount.
Right.
So have you folded the onion back, not using Mitch in this scenario, but just for
In
lack of a
general.
term,
Right.
have you looked at the impact to the profitability by doing that?
Yeah.
No.
Definitely the speed at which money comes in the door. I mean, look, it directly affects the health of our economy, right? The speed in which money changes hands. So when everybody's nervous and they don't know when their money's coming in, they're very slow to pay their bills, and it pushes us into a recession.
Yeah, and if we and we can be cognizant, and if if you have buying power and you're working with suppliers that they may need you more than you need them, there's no harm in going out there and taking an RFP or
Right.
putting your bids out to service. That is, if you've already kind of said, "Hey, listen, we're paying you too quick. We're not seeing the benefit, financially,
Right.
and it's hurting us from a cash flow perspective." Like that's a way to tie things in very quickly.
Right.
Or the same respect, I've called Trevor for 25 years, and I've seen Trevor's children grow up, and I love Trevor, and well, Trevor could be the highest guy on the mark. I mean, like I have to do both sides. I said
Of
you before,
course.
Mitch. I said me.
Yeah.
You know what I
Use
mean?
you
But
as the other example.
yeah, but I mean, it's just simple things, just going through like questions. So what I do when I work with any business models, I do like I call it a strategic assessment, which is just a fancy way of looking at your business and me going through and saying, hey, listen, they got vendor problems, they got management issues, they have cash
Right.
flow. Do they have a budget? Do they have any reporting so they know what they're looking at? Does data talk data? And then from there, I can create like a plan and say, hey, listen, if you want me to help you with this, this is like what I think it'll take in terms of hours, and we can figure something out between us. But you have to like understand those things. Like business owners should almost be doing that monthly to some respect. I
Of
mean,
course.
especially now. I mean, forget that. Weekly is now
Right.
probably the new norm just because businesses are closed, right? When are
Well,
we
I
going to
mean,
open up?
look, it all comes down to three things, right? People, process, and product.
Yep.
And you could break those in all kind of categories. But right now, which is I think I spoke about on my little, live stream every Thursday. I think I spoke about it last week. This is a good time to evaluate that stuff. Your business is closed. Things aren't operating right. Make sure
Yeah.
your people are in the right place. Sometimes they're
Make
not
sure
the
you
right
have the right
but
people.
yeah.
I mean, like,
I
God
mean,
forbid,
try and fix your organization first with the people that value you and people that are loyal to you. Maybe they're not in the right job. Maybe, or maybe, I was, we listened to, Mike McAllowitz, the author, business author. He wrote Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, The Pumpkin Plan, Profit First, all those
I
different
think
books.
I've heard of them, but
He spoke to our group last week. Anyway, he talks about a linchpin employee who is so key to the business that if they're not there, everything falls apart. So you've got to get away from that. You have to take that person and say, listen, Trevor, let's give you a 3-week vacation, but for the next 2 weeks, you prepare everybody to do your job. And then if you're that good, you move up in the chain, oversee things. But it's really dangerous because you walk outside and get hit by a bus.
It's over.
And then the business is like, well, what did Trevor used to do? I don't know. It was in Trevor's head, Well, he was the only one who knew everything he did. And Trevor wants to be really valuable to the business and be that linchpin person. And at the same token, he's really actually hurting the business and putting it at risk because the business is too reliant on Trevor. And also that puts a lot of stress on Trevor. Trevor has a stressful job. Everybody's looking at Trevor. They want things from him all the time. And then he tries to take on more things than he should because they don't want to say no to anybody. Oh, Trevor, can you help me with this? All right, fine. And then things start falling off of Trevor's desk because he's got so much stuff on his desk. It becomes problematic.
It's about like standardizing things, right? Like, so one of the things I'm big in, they're big in the corporate world. It's one of the reasons I went from large corporations. The same stuff that happens up there happens at a small level. They just have resources behind to kind of figure it out sometimes.
Right,
like
exactly.
Standardization.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I come in and turn the lights on every day. Like, oh, well, who's turning the lights on? Well, Mitch does it. Holy shit.
Why?
Well, if Mitch doesn't turn the lights on, what happens? I don't know. But like,
the day doesn't start, right?
The day doesn't start. But I mean, like, just understanding, people's processes in place within an organization and business. We use business in like wider
very
term.
Common, very problematic.
Hey, I have a customer service rep who's go above and beyond, and they're like, putting out fires for me on the daily. Well, why are they a customer service rep? It sounds like they're a manager now, or at least some kind of senior level
managing
position.
the CSRs, right?
Yeah. Or, like, what happens when they go? I mean, have you taken all that, again, like what to your point, like, have you taken all that kind of intuitive knowledge and that sweat equity they've built up over the years they've been with the organization, and it's gone?
Yeah.
Well, no, you you have to have stars. Like, you can't replicate what a star did. In my opinion, you can framework around the concept of what the star is doing, but you can't exactly replicate it because then everyone would be the same. But you can standardize the process.
But you can duplicate these people to a certain extent.
And replicate. Yeah. Like, hey, listen, every time I go on a sales call, I was asking him how their family's doing. Well, why does he do that? No one else does. Well, I don't know. Maybe because he actually cares about people.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And by the way, he's our top producer. Like, he sells 25% more than the next person, or the best next person.
Right. So why is that?
Yeah. And you break down what he does on his sales calls, and that's that's his like claim to fame. And it's something as simple as that. It's just, but it goes back to the reporting and stuff, and kind of maintaining vendors and all this other stuff inside a business model. It's like, hey, like, what do they do? Like, what does Mitch do when he comes in on a daily basis? Like, how do I get my information to the bank when they ask me what I'm doing with my line of credit or my covenants, whatever the case is? Well, where does it come from? Oh, crap. Well, I mean, 20 of us put this information together and it goes out. Yeah. Why is 20 people doing it? Like, do you get QuickBooks, Sage, whatever it is?
Very inefficient. Yeah, exactly.
And then just creating some kind of simple things like, hey, just like if you do this and you hit automate, oh, wow. Like, I'm not trying to take people's jobs away, but also at the same time trying to understand like how you get rid of things that shouldn't be done. Like, that's every job I've ever been in my full-time career. I've went in and I sat down and said, hey, let me just evaluate what the team does.
Right.
By no means do I love everyone here, but let me just see what's happening, what's coming out of the team.
Right.
9 times out of 10, there's so many inefficient like processes, reports
Of
going out.
course.
And like,
Because
why'd you
they're
do it?
because they're
Well,
because they're haphazard. They were never
I've
set up.
always done it. Mitch, I've
Right.
known you for 20 years. They're just saying, like, you've always told me to do this. That's what I've always done.
Right.
And then you teach that person that piece. It's that old telephone game, probably in the beginning, a long time ago, it was great. But now it doesn't work out
Yeah,
anymore.
because the business owner and his assistant. That was it. It was the two of them. They were just getting started, and she
Yeah.
did all the office support, and he would come in and say, "Here, can you take care of this? Can you do that? Let's do this." And then they started growing. Now they have 5 or 10 employees that have been added to do different things, and then just things shot all over the place.
Yeah.
Different
It's
people.
like, and then when you go back in and you try to peel the onion back on those things and look at, hey, listen, Mitch was doing this or Trevor was doing that. You're like, wow, like, man, that made sense. Like when we made, 50 grand a year, now we're
Right.
making 10 million.
500. Yeah, 10
Yeah. Like,
million. Right,
yeah,
exactly.
like that's not scalable.
No.
So, but it's good. Like you have to have those baselines to start because then you say, all right, what can I use here? And maybe I could take something from it. Maybe
Right.
we can evolve it, right? People talk about, I hate that word pivoting. Like I use it too quite a bit and I
Well,
shouldn't.
it's developing, right? You're
Right.
developing people
You
and
adapt, you
processes.
evolve, right?
Yeah.
Like pivoting sounds to me just like
Like a change in the business,
it,
what you're doing. It's
yeah,
not.
yeah. But you're really just kind of you're really evolving. Businesses evolve, right? Hey, listen, through the COVID crisis right now, businesses have to evolve.
Oh, yeah, the way
We
that they
physically
deal with
have
their
no.
customers is gonna change. The way they collect money is changing. Look, a lot of small business owners are like, "Well, I don't take credit cards, because it's expensive and we have to pay." Yeah, but there's a value to the reliability of people paying and the speed at which you get paid
Yeah, the
and the
speed at which you get
convenience
paid.
of
Okay.
people paying. And now it's more than convenience. It's like people don't wanna touch cash,
Yeah.
so you better come up with different methods for them to
and
pay you.
and the solutions, right? You have like touchless POS systems, like where I've demoed things, recently where it's like people will come in and not even have to touch anything. They
Yeah.
use your own phone, which you feel to me that's ultra comfort. If I'm going to go somewhere and I'm eventually going to be able to take my mask off, whatever the case is, and then I don't have to like physically hand you my credit card.
Right.
Like besides you bringing my food or whatever the case,
Right.
like bringing clothes, whatever the model is.
Legitimately contact delivery or service.
Yeah, contactless, whatever.
Right.
Exactly. Like if I can get
100%.
if I can get it close to that as possible, at least now, it'll
Yeah.
get consumers to feel comfortable.
That's the
And then,
biggest issue people are going to face now.
oh,
Comfort.
oh my God, like
Just
how do
because
you
the
make them
government
feel
says you
safe?
can open doesn't mean people are comfortable to go to your salon and get your hair done when people are
Mitch,
cutting your hair and standing over you with a face shield. I don't
if
know
to,
about that.
if tomorrow's like everyone just all unanimously across all the states in the United States, we're like, yeah, everything's fine, everything's back to normal. People would still not feel like it was back to normal, right? So there's going to be
They'd be
such a
more
lag.
nervous. Right.
Yeah. And it's just like, how do you mitigate and for me, how do you make someone feel safe? Well, if you meet somebody and let's say you're more comfortable and you're in the opportunity of shaking hands again, it's like a
Right.
dead art.
Right.
But let's
Exactly.
say they're not, you don't put your hand out, make them feel uncomfortable. You like, the same way works for business owners. Like, but then as a business owner, you have to realize that now you're not going to have as much capacity. So
Right.
now you're looking at things in a different limelight. Like, hey, maybe I can't have the staff I used to have, or maybe I need to create alternative services to kind of help augment where I am today. Like I think of like, I saw something very interesting. I'm not going to plug the name of the business because I saw it when I was riding my bike with my family in the Highlands, but
Right.
it was a traveling boutique. It was in someone's van, like truck,
Okay.
bunch of clothes, touchscreen POS. Like, so you did have to swipe your card, but I mean, people weren't wearing masks, so you get close enough to just do the swipe.
Right.
I mean, damn. I'm not like a shopaholic by nature, but I like some clothes. Every now and then,
Right.
you need a fresh pair of socks and clean shirt.
Yeah.
And I hate using Amazon for everything.
I
You
know.
know, like it's just after a while you want to get back out there. So maybe that's a way that some places can start. I'm going to start looking into it and talk to retail shops and say, I saw them do it. I'm sure they don't have the the trademark on being outside because it's basically everyone could be outside.
Of course. Right. They don't have the patent on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
So
that's what I
like
was talking about last week on my live stream was that business owners better think about how the customers want you to do business with them, not how they can do business under
yeah,
the
yeah.
law
How
and the
they
governor's orders. how customers want to do business. What's going to make them comfortable? Like you said, what's going to make you go back in to a retail store, a men's clothing store or whatever, be in that store and willing to try things on or do different things. Because right now I had like a Lord and Taylor gift card or something. Well, first of all, I was thinking, oh, well, Lord and Taylor might go out of business during this whole thing. I better use it. So
Yeah.
I ordered, so what I did, I ordered some pants online. I went through their sizing chart and they came and they fit me, which was surprising. But
Yeah.
I would never do that. I would go and try the
Yeah.
clothes
You
on.
try them on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's
So
going to be
how do you get people back to feeling
comfortable
comfortable?
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like some level of comfortability. I talk with the restaurants. We talk about like outdoor dining. You talk about the food truck model, and I talked about this before too. Like, listen, how do you create like an outdoor environment? Obviously, dining will be allowed outdoors soon, right? In the next week, 2 weeks, whatever the
Ours
case
is,
is.
New Jersey, June 15th. Yeah.
But how do you just get past that? I mean, there's only so much real estate out there in front of your restaurants, unless you have
Correct.
10 acres that I don't know about. Most restaurants don't. Like,
No,
can you
not in
find
town.
places that you can set up shop temporarily? It's beautiful in New Jersey right now. I mean,
Right.
we should
But
all
then
be
it
outside,
rains and you're shut down that day.
Yeah.
Right. It's
So, but can you
problematic.
make it nimble enough and can you make the business model work? If you look at it, you call someone like me, maybe like you, and we look at the information and say, hey, listen, if you charge this price point, you expect this many customers, you can make this thing go.
Right.
Like, wow, you
Right.
start creating a buzz again. Like, and people feel safe. People
Yeah,
aren't
as long as
next
they
to each
feel
other.
safe, that's the biggest problem. There's going to be people that don't come even outdoors.
Yeah, there's only so much we can do in this
I
world,
mean,
Mitch.
look, until they kind of see what's going on and how
Yeah,
separate they
right.
are
You
and
hear about like, hey,
no
listen,
spikes, right, and
Mitch and
hospitalizations and
Trevor
stuff
went
like that.
to this outdoor restaurant the other day in, Westfield Park or something like that, wherever the
Right.
case is. And, I think they're both okay. I've heard from both of them. They're both doing okay. And, they didn't have to wear their masks because maybe the tables were 20
Right.
feet apart.
Right. Exactly.
And we're outside and I feel a little comfortable. I got my little daughter with me and I feel like I'm able to kind of do this again. And then that creates a buzz,
Right.
like everyone's like, oh God, maybe we should do this,
Of course. Well, it happened the reverse of that. It was like,
Yeah.
this is going on, so now we shouldn't do this. So it's going to
Yeah,
take a while
exactly.
to loosen up. I mean, that's definitely a problem. But
I
I
just
think,
caught,
yeah.
oh, sorry. What were
No,
you
go
saying?
ahead. You tell me.
I just caution business owners now to like look at like their price, look at their costs. Obviously, like when I think when they look use the word discount, be careful, right? Because you can
Right.
only drop your price so much. If you don't, you can discount up to 100% if you're willing to suffer.
Yeah, give it
But
away for
unless
free.
you know your cost mechanism and what you need to make, I'd say I'd be weary or leery about giving incentives.
Right. You really got to know your pricing structure and your
Yeah, and
costs. It really costs to run your business. I think
yeah,
that's where things really fall apart. I mean, look, I know businesses have marketing problems, right? They don't market enough, they don't sell enough. But at the end of the day, if you could sell your way to the moon, if every product you're doing is losing 50 cents, it's going to catch up with you at some point, especially
yeah.
during times like these.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, like you go from 10,000 sales a month to 500. So those 500 have to be like spot on, or at least close to like an average of where you need to be, so you don't further degrade yourself and put yourself into a worse situation when the gates do open a little bit more, and you're not, you know, nimble enough or not viable enough to make a go out of it because you've put yourself down this hill and just keep falling and falling and you really didn't have a catch at the bottom.
well, I think also business owners need to know if the governor says, okay, you can be open at 50% capacity
What does that
and
look like?
you're not yeah, first of all, you got to figure out, are you making money, right? Because if you're losing money, then you might as well not open until you can open up bigger. But if you are breaking even, let's say, you better know your numbers to know, okay, well, when do I start making money? Is it at 55%? Is it at 60%? Is it at 75%? Is it at 90%? Maybe you shouldn't be in business if it's at 90%, but you know what I'm saying? So this is
We
the
should break
time
even.
to really
Yeah.
do, yeah. So let's talk about that because I think that the the part of a business plan that business owners struggle the most with is the financial part of it. I think, doing a marketing plan and saying you're going to do things on social media and putting that together, and these are my people and this is my business and the product and so forth is doable. And I always say, I rarely read that as part of a business plan because it always sounds good, right? If you're writing a business plan, it sounds bad, there's something wrong. It should always sound good if you're writing it, right? The
Oh yeah.
financials
So
is really where the truth comes, right?
yeah.
If you're doing it right. So what kind of advice do you have for people that are, they're not large corporations, they're not CFO people. How do they get started? What kind of things should they do to kind of start to create the financial portion of their business plan, which they may have never really done before?
Yeah, I mean, like if I look at like if we just use the word break even, because I think that's a perfect example, by the way,
Okay.
Mitch. Like, where do I need to stand? Like, just start something simple, right? So if I look at we'll use the word of direct and indirect costs, right?
Okay.
Direct costs or anything tied to your service or product, right? Like, what does it cost me to make it? Like,
Right.
if I'm shipping it,
The cost of producing your product directly, right?
yeah, like let's just use that as like the only node that we use for direct costs.
Okay.
And then let's just say, hey, listen, just then alone, what else do I need to supply that? Well, I have a land lease,
Right.
forget marketing and other stuff for now. Just kind of
No, just say
basics,
you have
right?
rent, you have a
Yeah,
phone.
rent. What are the things that are like, I have a phone, I have internet, I have 3 employees, right? Let's just start with basic things,
Right.
right? Just to kind of keep things simple. And then let's just say you're selling a widget or a product. It's a little bit easier. Services are a little bit harder, but on a product basis, hey, I need to sell, 50 coffee mugs at, $2 a unit. All right.
Okay.
Does that break me even based on what I just told you?
Right.
And then once
List
you
it on
get
a
that,
spreadsheet, right? Put down
yeah,
your
once you get that
costs.
simple concept down, and by no means you need to pay me to create a spreadsheet like that. You could Google that. I'm going to give the best advice ever.
Right.
Go to Excel, go to the internet. Sales break even analysis. There's tons of plug and play templates. You don't need to
right.
be a guru. Like, I tell this to everybody, 2 people I work with. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't create this. Like,
No.
I'll help you walk through it and help you kind of divulge it, but I wish I could take credit for it. Yeah,
Right.
it's just like, like, can you look at that and then say, hey, in a down market at 25% capacity, what does that bring those sales? So originally I was at, I don't know, let's just call it 10,000 coffee mugs a month. Now at 20%, just simple math. I'm just not going to do it on the phone, right? Like, right, hell, I'm at 2,000, 3,000, whatever it is. Yeah. So what does that do to that same model we just talked about? So my cost of goods or direct cost didn't change, right? Because they're pretty much stagnant. And then my fixed costs stayed the way they are.
They're tied to per unit, so your costs
obviously
down.
They go down
But
as
it's
the
not going
sales
to be
go down.
direct, right? Because you may be paying more per unit now than you were at 10,000, then you're paying at 2,000. But let's assume that you don't.
Yeah.
So you
let's
drop
just say
80%.
let's say
the cost of goods
most of the
sold
things are the
drops
same.
80%, let's say.
Yeah. So what does that do to your profit? Just simple,
Right.
but plain and simple.
It's the
All right,
indirect
now
costs
let's
that are going to kill you.
Yeah, it's kind of like I pay myself. Why I have to pay my rent. Like, so I get to
paid last, right?
Right. So I get to a loss leader. Like, and then once you have a loss leader identified, I always like to work my way backwards. Right. So you brought up a great point. Supplying power, right? So if I buy 100 million of one thing, it costs me less. If I buy 10 of it, it costs me more. It's just plain and simple math.
Obviously, right.
That's, the ABCs of the world. Like, so now I need to keep that intact. And you start layering different things in. That's kind of how I've ever done a detailed analysis. I start with something very, very simple. And then I kind of look at it and talk about it with other people. I'm not an army of one, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know everything, but I say, hey, Mitch, take a look at this, right? What do you think? And then we say, oh, well, you forgot, office supplies, or you forgot marketing, or you forgot, and then you start to, okay, let me add in the insurance, use line item, right? Yeah. Or T&E, right? I have to travel or pay whatever for my Zoom accounts now.
Right. Maybe you have, you got to go to trade shows, right? You need a booth. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah, right. It just adds up. You start kind of you start with 4 or 5, you get to 50,
right?
And now you have like, wow, you have something here. And then you go, hey, listen, what if I discounted my rate? All right, well now you really start to move in a momentum.
Then you can play around with numbers because it's a safer way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but what I always like to do is I like to bring in, like, I think of my lieutenants in the organization, whether they be managers, whomever, even customer service reps, whatever the case is. Like, things that obviously is a level of confidentiality, right? You have to be careful with that. But at the same time, say, hey, listen, I'm thinking about, changing my rate to X. You spitball these ideas with people, and then new things come out. It's one of the reasons I always like working with teams and not just by myself, even if it's a colleague, because someone's always going to have a different point of view, not a better point of view. But there will be other points of view. Business owners don't know everything. Even the most profitable business owner in the world, doesn't know everything. They still had someone they talk to, wife, children, family, whomever. Right. There's some ideas coming from other places. It's about, collaborating those ideas and making sense of them.
Yeah, that's what I like. I like the idea of an advisory board, even if it's a couple of people that you rely on for your business, their mentors.
You and I have talked about this. I'm not going to plug what I'm doing down at the end of June, but at the same time, I'm not an IT guy. I know IT very well because I've had ERPs and I've played around with different systems, and I'm technically savvy. Like, I can look at data and can understand it. But if I'm doing something that requires like a changeover in my accounting system per se,
Right.
I wouldn't do it myself. I'm probably almost qualified to do it, but I'd reach to a resource, an
Right.
expert within that field. And then as I'm dealing with them, maybe hey, listen, I pick up some tools of the trade and I learn a little bit more. And then I'm able to kind of help businesses even further because now it's something I didn't know, but I'm part of the process.
Right.
That's why cross-functional teams do better than, salesmen and salesmen, finance and finance, legal and legal.
No, because they all have different perspectives. If they're 5 sales guys, they're probably close to the same perspective.
Yeah.
A little bit, but not enough.
You throw in, if I'm thinking about like a restaurant, you throw in a server, a chef,
right,
your business manager, and I don't know, your marketing person, for lack of a better word. You put them together and you say, hey, listen, like, how do we resolve our menu problems? Whoa. Server's like, oh, I didn't, shrimp cocktails serve go like hotcakes. Maybe the chef didn't even know that.
Right.
Maybe they should. Maybe the marketing person didn't know that.
Right. Yeah.
And
course.
is that highlighted on your menu in such a way, or is there some kind of promo with that?
Yeah.
I just I struggle with people that try to do it all themselves. I really do. It's too difficult a world, and you're missing out. I think you're missing too much. You're missing way too much.
Well, very often than not, we're brought in when there's problems, not when they're building a team to increase the efficiency of their business. And I understand that. I mean, people are dealing with their problems and they're trying to run their business and they have cash flow and they're like, oh, let's go out and spend money on a CFO and a general counsel, and it's usually like, oh, Mitch, I had a little problem. The DOL called me and I got a problem with employees and they're fining me. I'm like, okay. Then I got to figure out, well, what's going on with their process, what their records look like. How do they keep their records? How do they contract their employees? It's the whole process. Where did that break down? Or maybe the government's just wrong, but
which is not uncommon.
Yeah, which is very common. But I think that's important. And I think that building processes to run your business so you can eventually be the guy who doesn't show up every day and is the real entrepreneur and so forth is important when it comes to, kind of figuring out all these things and not having it break down and not knowing. Right. The worst thing happens when your car breaks down and you don't know what's wrong with the car. You don't, not a mechanic.
Pay someone to diagnose it. You got to pay somebody to diagnose it, right?
What do I do now? So you got to call a guy to pick up the car and they got to tow it there. And then they're going to look at the car and figure out what's wrong with it. But you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's the problem. We can't always diagnose our own businesses. We're too, what's the word? We're too attached to.
Too ingrained in what's going on. Yeah. Like emotionally attached. Yeah. Situational awareness. I've heard that term a lot.
That's a good term.
Do you sit inside a box and like, hey, listen, I can tell you there's a spider crawling on my basement wall behind me. Like I just off the corner of my eye, I caught it. It's going to freak me out a little bit later. I have to take care of it. But are you a business owner so caught up in what's going on today and putting out the fires that you miss that? I have a crack in the foundation. Like,
right. You don't see that.
Well, it's been there, whatever. I don't care about it.
Right.
Well, pretty soon the friggin' building's going to collapse on top of you. I mean, God forbid, but how do you get past that? And I mean, you have to, I don't want to say you need consultants and you need people like us in their lives, but I'll be damned if we don't try to make it easier. If at the very minimum, we're just trying to alleviate some of your stress.
You need advisors of some sort. I mean,
I mean, you can't, again, I just go back to, there's no army of one, right? You can't possibly know everything. No, and especially when it comes to, there's always updates in the legal world of what's going on. There's always different ways to look at finance and, accounting's a whole nother nightmare. I mean, CPA and tax advisor, I mean, that changes right now, daily with what's going on in the world. These guys are men and women out there are just like racking their brains because something new is different. Yeah. Exactly. And take advantage of that. I mean, take advantage of people with experience within their field. Or I always like dealing with someone who I know failed quite a bit because I know they've seen a lot of crap. That's kind of my MO.
We learn more from struggles and failures than we do from success. No question.
I've been part of a ton of projects that have failed. I've been blamed. I was told I led pursuit teams that didn't work out well, but I learned. I'll be honest with you. I won't make those mistakes again. I'll never make the same mistake.
Right. You'll make other mistakes. That's part of growing.
I know. I will make other mistakes.
No question about
it. So that's kind of me. And I guess from my business model, if I can just help, businesses kind of help get through this. And then, once we get through this, then it's another world, right? Then it's how do we plan, in the future and protect ourselves down the road.
Right.
Right. Because now this is a wake up call.
Deal with this. Yeah.
How do we weren't necessarily set up financially, operationally, legally to kind of go through these kind of things.
No, there's no
So
question about it.
technology, right? Technology is probably going to be the biggest one of them all because
Yeah.
no one was ready for, touchless everything.
Right.
Some people were. I shouldn't say
Right.
that. There probably are some businesses out there.
But the word Zoom didn't exist in most people's vocabulary.
Yeah.
I mean, they knew FaceTime, but not for the way we're working. And I think the ironic thing is that companies are finding that employees, in a lot of cases, are more productive at home. They're working longer hours because it's flexible. They're more available. They're on these calls. They're doing this. They're doing that. The companies are getting more out of them.
Yeah.
First of all, they don't lose an hour or two traveling, right, back and forth. And they don't need to be there where you're touching each other.
Yeah.
It's overvalued. I mean, we want to see people. I think the employees, if they have a choice, they would do a hybrid, right, where they can come in the office a couple of days a week and they would stay home a couple of days a week. That would be their choice to operate. I don't think people want to completely stay at home, never see each other. They do want to be in the position where you say, oh, next pandemic came. Okay, I'm ready. I could stay home. But ultimately, you want to get out. I mean, we live on human contact. You want to be out there. But
Yeah.
you need to do it every day, getting on the train, taking the bus, going to the city, walking across town, hearing the noise, smelling the this, the that.
Yeah. I mean, I think about just how life, just kind of so I lived in Toms River and I commuted to Midtown Manhattan for years.
That's a huge commute.
And I thought to myself, man, if I could do something God, I'm on buses, I'm walking, I'm driving my car to the.
How long did your commute take each way? 2 hours?
2.5.
Oh my God.
2 to 2.5 one way. So it was
5 hours.
And then obviously,
what do we work? Most people work 8 to 10 hours a day.
Yeah, that was a 10 plus. It was just
that's crazy.
And you scale back, and every job I've ever had, commuted up in North Jersey, right? There's a lot more opportunity there than there is here. And
right,
when this thing happened, people start realizing, hey, I talked to a potential client in Scotland the other day. Whoa, crap! I didn't even know I could do that. But
right,
I think people businesses are gonna have to evolve again now and say, hey, listen, maybe I didn't need to do it this way. Maybe I can use suppliers out in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Maybe
they
can make it work
here. I can tap in employees in North Carolina.
Yeah, right. Or exactly. But you don't want to lose the core of what made your business the business too. Don't I don't want to use the word sell out, but don't just boom. All right, everything's now virtual, right? There's a reason people come to you for your product or your service. Of course. Don't lose that special sauce. But at the same time, if you can make it a little bit more efficient, or you can outsource pieces of it to make it better, then there's no problem doing that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So
I think that's where businesses need to evolve.
Well, why don't maybe you can give us some links in the show notes to some, break-even analysis templates or something people can get access.
Oh yeah, listen, there's a ton. I'd love to. You know what? Actually, I'm going to make a note of that because I think, it's so funny. Just real quick, I spoke to a friend of mine who's starting a new business, and they were talking about break-even. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to send you something. Oh, this looks great. I'm like, yeah, it looks really good, right? I'm like, I did it. They're like, no. I'm like, yeah, I didn't do it. I'm just kidding around. It's on the internet. Go Excel. Go Google Excel documents and type in break even, and you'll find the top one is beautiful. I refer to it all the time.
Same with business plan templates in general. You can get a whole template of a whole business plan.
Why struggle? You don't recreate the wheel, but we do make it spin faster, right? That's the idea. You
that's
never
a
recreate
good
it.
Analogy. I don't start if you need a contract or a will or a business document. I don't start with white paper and a pencil. Kidding me?
We're not artists. I am a little bit of an artist when it comes to the method, but not. I don't blank it out
with a blank canvas. Yeah, exactly. It's craziness. Exactly. All right. Well, Trevor, I appreciate you coming on today.